All right, welcome to your video lecture on wetlands. This is one of my all-time favorite topics to study. If you will, pause this video to take down your 2 vocab words of the day. We don't have a bell ringer, but we do have vocab, so pause this, and when you're ready, go ahead and move on. Go into Canvas real quick to show you what pages we're going to. So here you are, Earth and Environmental. Go down to modules. We are on day 4, wetland notes, so let's see what those look like. There are 2 pages. One is more of a worksheet, and the other one is wetland note. So here it is. If you will go, it says wetland and estuaries. We're going to get started. So wetlands, what are they? They are areas of land that are covered by water at least part of the year. So I think it's as small, if I remember right, as about 2 weeks out of the year. So all that needs to be covered for the length of time for this area of land to be a wetland is just 2 weeks of this land being underwater. So I remember being at UNCW and learning about wetlands for the first time, and my professor pointing out just in low-lying area on campus that held water for just a little bit of time. Like, I think in the spring it would hold water, and that was actually considered a wetland because it was covered by water. Wetlands are really cool. So there are some roles of wetlands in the ecosystem. They do a lot of things for us. One of the biggest things, or the most beneficial things for us, is that wetlands actually prevent flooding by holding the water, much like a sponge. So we are going to be doing a lab on Monday, if you're with me, and then possibly we'll repeat the lab on Thursday and Friday just in case so that you can see it, because it's one of my favorites. But actually, if you have the presence of a wetland in your river, it could help prevent flooding and protect your property. So things like homes, maybe farms, or whatever it is that's on that other side of the river. They are actually, much like a sponge is a cleaner, they're naturally water quality improvement. They're a filter. So as the water flows through the soil of a wetland and the toxins are being filtered out by the plants and by the soil so that it doesn't seep into the aquifer. They are natural shoreline erosion controls because they are so covered with plants. Those plant roots are actually holding the soil particles in a little bit so that they're not eroded by whatever body of water is right there, whether it be the ocean or the river. They're abundant in biodiversity, so they have lots of fish and other wildlife. And they produce some natural products for the economy like shellfish, timber, blueberries, and some medicines. So wetlands are super awesome, and we actually, as humans, can gain a lot from them. So protecting them is something really important. It's so important I have a whole poster on it in the classroom. So here's how a wetland works. Groundwater flows through, groundwater flows down through the ground, like we talked about when it rains. It infiltrates through the ground, and it goes into these saturated areas of water called peat. There's a lot to peat, but you don't need to know much about it. So that is naturally filtered by the soil right here, but also by these plants, and the bacteria around the plants will filter out the contaminants, creating better water quality and sediments. So also, as the stream comes down through the wetland, the dirty water and any contaminants, so toxins, are filtered out through all these plants and water, all the plants and the sediments there. So later downstream, it'll have cleaner water. This could be something like thermal-like pollution, so this could help. It could cool down the water so it's not as hot, so it doesn't kill fish or create a lot of algae. It could filter out things like chemical toxins that have been thrown into the river. It can filter out, hopefully not trash, because if there is trash, it's just going to sit in the wetland, but it could possibly filter out things like trash or microplastics. And it also, the area provides a wonderful habitat for wildlife. But really and truly, it helps gain some clean water. Wetland loss, so this is the sad part. We are losing wetland area again and again in huge amounts. So wetland loss is the decrease in wetland area due to the conversion of wetland to non-wetland habitats. This could be something like an agriculture farm. You could drain a wetland so that it's better able for you to farm the soil. It could be something like building more beach houses, or building a river house, or building a parking lot, or building a factory, or building something that is just not a wetland anymore. You can be fined. The United States has some pretty heavy fines in there that'll kind of hit you if you develop the wetland, but that doesn't do much. I know that there is a place not so far from here that actually built on to their establishment and encroached into wetland, and they were slapped with a $50,000 fine. They paid the fine, and the land is now built on a pond, so it's not like the wetland went back to wetland. They just basically were fined, and then we still have the non-wetland feature, which is really sad that they didn't make them take it down. But the United States alone has lost more than half of its original wetlands, so we continue to lose over 1,000 wetland acres a year, which is a huge deal. So if you are looking in my little chart right here about wetland loss, so we are in Bladen County, we are losing about 5 to 15 square miles of lost wetland in Bladen County. If you go to Wilmington, we're losing less than that, 0 to -5. Some areas are actually gaining wetland, like down here in the panhandle of Florida and some parts of Georgia, but for the majority we are losing wetland again and again, and the sources for those facts come from NOAA, the North Atlantic Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, same people that report on our hurricanes. Anyways, wetland and estuary degradation, so this is actually wetlands losing or becoming not wetlands. So they're becoming so polluted that they cannot naturally filter out all of the toxins, and it's actually becoming kind of detrimental or very negative, very hurtful to the environment, to the wetland itself. So although wetlands can improve the watershed water quality, their capability to process pollutants without becoming degraded can be exceeded, so there's a limit to how many toxins we can pump into a wetland and it will filter out. Just like with anything, if you are eating a bunch of junk food, no matter how many juice cleanses you do, eventually your body is going to be like, okay, enough, no more junk food. Many NC wetlands have suffered functional degradation, although it's difficult to calculate the magnitude of just how badly we are treating these wetlands. Some activities that lead to wetland degradation are urbanization, or building of cities, industrialization, so the building of factories. Agriculture can severely degrade wetlands because we have runoff from the fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides. Marinas and also mining can kind of damage these very, very beneficial ecological and economic features of our land. There are some types of wetlands, and I apologize, these pictures are not the best as far as design goes for reading, but estuaries are my first type of wetland I wanted to talk about. It's an ecosystem in which fresh water from rivers mixes with salt water from the ocean. They become a nutrient tap, which means that they have very mineral-rich mud, and it drops to the bottom. In some areas, marsh grass will grow in the mud, and these are ecological hotspots like I talked about. Good nutrients, good soil means lots of good plants, which means lots of good animals, which means lots of biodiversity and a very healthy ecosystem. And also, marsh mud is so full of good things that you can actually take the bacteria from the marsh, like take a bunch of marsh mud, and you can utilize that bacterial processes of how they're processing those minerals and make it into energy, although it's not obviously mass marketed because we're not doing marsh mud batteries. But anyways, you can do that. Marshes are a second type of wetland. We have freshwater wetlands that contain non-woody plants. They attract many types of nesting birds. So these don't have that mix of salt water that an estuary does. And then we have swamps. So these are freshwater again, but they contain woody plants instead of non-woody plants. So marshes are like grasses, very low-lying areas. Swamps are more woody, lots of trees, lots of what you would see here in Bladen County. Marsh you would find a little bit closer to the ocean, when more of our flat regions. Water ecosystems, so we have, again, fresh water like our lakes and our rivers and our wetlands, swamps and marshes. Mix of fresh water we call estuary, and just a reminder that when I mix fresh water and salt water, it becomes something called brackish water. And you can see those, just a map of our wetlands here. All those green dots are wetlands, and they are decreasing each day. Lastly, saltwater intrusion in North Carolina. We've talked about aquifers and what's going on in the ground as far as water underneath our feet. Here's one of the things that's happening with how we are pumping out the water. So this is called saltwater intrusion. It's the movement of saltwater into freshwater aquifers along the coast. So there is a zone between saltwater and freshwater underneath the earth, and as we are pumping the water and decreasing the water table, we are creating a pressure system which actually pulls the salt water into our wells and into our freshwater ecosystems, which we cannot drink fresh water, so it's not good for us as far as drinking wise, but it also causes some serious effects on the environment. How does it occur? So it occurs, saltwater has a much higher mineral content than freshwater, so it's denser and has a higher water pressure. So the saltwater can push inland beneath the fresh water is what that says. Do human activities make a difference? Of course they do. The more we study earth and environmental, the more we will learn that humans are kind of wreaking havoc on the earth that we live on. There are things, and we're going to learn all about them, how we can be better environmental citizens and how we can do our part to help decrease these activities. But humans definitely make a difference. So we have increased the saltwater intrusion in many coastal areas. Why? Because we've increased drilling of the fresh water along coastal areas, so we've made more wells. And we've also been digging navigational channels and digging drain canals. And all of those are going to make the salt water kind of intrude into our freshwater aquifers, which is no good for us. Also, weather makes a difference. So as we get more natural disasters like hurricane storm surges and sea level rise, we're actually increasing the saltwater intrusion that we have. So like our extreme events are going to make a difference. So if you can imagine, if a storm surge comes, which remember that is the amount of water from the ocean that is pushed into the land due to a hurricane or flood, it is intruding into our land. It's going to kind of go with our water molecules down into the aquifer, and it's going to pollute it that way as well. Why is saltwater intrusion an issue in North Carolina? Again, it can lead to contamination of drinking water. It's a very egotistic human answer to that, but it can lead to the contamination of drinking water. So we can't drink salt water. We're going to build more wells somewhere else. And it's going to be harder and harder for that recharge to be able, the precipitation or the natural recharge to be able to offset what we have done with the salt water. How to prevent it? So we can use injection wells, which is different than our regular wells. We can use subsurface barrier, so we can put a barrier underneath the water there that's going to kind of stop the movement of the salt water. And we can monitor the systems is a big thing, because oftentimes we don't know that a well has been intruded upon in salt water until you go to take a drink and it is salty. And that is all that I have for you as far as wetland notes goes. You're going to flip over to that next page though and answer those questions. Let's see if we can find them. Flip over to this page and answer the questions on the river. You have a word bank right here. Fill in the blank. Each will be used once, so once you use it you can cross it off. And then you're going to answer the questions about the river. You have a young river, a mature river, and then a very old river. Those are going to be used more than once. Label which one goes where. Be sure the picture is quality enough, because while this one is graded for completion in your notes, this one right here is graded for credit, so I would need to be able to read what you said. If I can't read it, I'm going to mark it as a 0 and tell you to try and take a better picture. So pull out your photography skills, please. If you finish this, I also have another reading that I'm going to post for you. It's optional. It's going to be about our microplastics in the ocean, so something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the year, just kind of a preview. Have a great day, guys. I miss you, and enjoy.